So Rob Jackson is one of our members. Rob has been in IT for the last 40 years. He loves the customer side of things. The last 27 years he's been with IBM. He's married and he's got 3 sons. And he's an avid tennis player, golfer, reader, and lover of the bush. And then, Rob, you can just tell me in the bio that you sent me, you also say Twitcher. So I'm not sure what Twitcher is. So if you can just tell us what that means. But then that's Rob. And he's going to talk about the topic of business resilience. So, Rob, I'm going to hand over to you. I'm just going to bring up your screen. In the meantime, you can start talking, and then you can just tell me when to move forward to the next slide on your topic.
Cool. Thanks, Jasper. Thanks for the introduction. To answer your question, a twitcher is a person that goes to the bush and takes a pair of binoculars and looks at every little brown job or raptor or vulture or whatever. We're blessed with 950 birds in South Africa, bird species. So there's just no end to it. So it's become a very fulfilling hobby for us as a family. All right, so Twitch is done. So good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for making the time this morning. How are you all adapting to the new reality? I've chosen this awesome background picture from Unsplash to reflect our inability to predict what's next. It was a toss-up between this and Eskom, but I opted for the storm. The penny dropped for me several years ago based on 2 books I've read. There's Nassim Taleb's book, The Black Swan, and Little Hart's book, Why We Don't Learn from History. And just to prove the point, we're all adept at making the same mistakes, which is why we progressed from World War I to World War II. All right, next slide. So these are the definitions of resilience as pulled out of the OED, the Oxford Dictionary. They're both definitions of resilience, but it's really only the first one that is applicable. Springing back is not an option today. We don't want to go back to where we were, and anybody who thinks we are going to go back to where we are, I think is very mistaken. I would add one more adjective to the definition though, and that is courage. Because to make changes often takes a lot of courage, putting your business at risk. So it needs bold people, bold leadership to actually go through building business resilience. So having a look at why so many businesses have failed, so many businesses are really battling to get over the current lockdown, stay-at-home COVID crisis. So the businesses that fail have typically similar characteristics. The leadership thinks this will pass. Okay, we have survived worse. They're comfortable with the status quo. I remember a friend of mine invited me when I was at IBM to go and talk to their board about moving off Burroughs devices. It was a bank those days, which by the way, no longer exists. And the board comprised, to be rude, a bunch of old fuddy-duddies who were very comfortable with their way of life and they didn't want to move at all. Needless to say, that bank doesn't exist anymore. So it's basically people living in denial, unwilling to accept the new reality, adopting a victim mentality. Oh, why do these things happen to me? And often a mushroom management style, the old style of managing people, which puts them in a room and just leaves them there to grow. So the old style is very prevalent today. There's a lot of uncomfortable managers or leaders that are sitting out there saying, oh my goodness, people haven't come to work today. How do I know they're doing what they're supposed to do? They didn't clock in. How do I record their time? How do I know they're working? So basically, trust is missing. Next slide. So on the counter, how many businesses succeed? Why do they succeed? So change becomes a common thing in those, you're always going through change, living in a changed world. Voluntary change because you want to do things differently, that constant improvement. It's not just the opposite of why businesses fail. So when was the last time any of you really, really changed? Change must be a way of life, not something you do when forced to. Change must be voluntary. It was interesting to note, the fifth bullet down, flexibility. We did a little survey of the people at our company about 4 or 5 years ago and said, why do you stay? And the prime reason, there were 3 reasons given. The prime reason, though, was flexibility. That you trust us, you allow us to work from where is more suitable. We allow teams to decide when they're going to meet, where they're going to meet, how often they're going to meet. So we work on the basis of self-managed teams, and trust is just, it goes without saying that people are trusted and they trust the management of the company as well. Next slide. So just to support the view that I am quite an animal lover, and this happens to be a peppered moth they found in the UK. It survived for centuries. Guess why, if you don't already know? I'll give you a minute to think about it, or 30 seconds to think about it. There are many stories on survival with one common factor, and that's adaptability. So how did the peppered moth survive? So this is the same moth. And this is a pre and post-industrial age moth. So against the backdrop of a tree or a building that was in the industrial age, it actually, you had a lot of carbon output. So trees collected the carbon and everything typically got quite a lot darker. So the moth managed to adapt so that it wouldn't be seen, a form of camouflage, so it wouldn't be seen by its predators. And it survived. So typically, companies that have survived have been through 3 stages. Stage 1 is we call it a street fight. All hands on deck, do whatever needs to be done, quick decision making, and totally in survival mode. Now that was the first couple of weeks after March the 26th, doing whatever short-term, taking whatever short-term decisions and actions could be taken. After the first few weeks, then people went into what we call the sprint phase, where businesses were pivoting, changing product and service mixes, routes to market, facilitating work from home. And then about a couple of months later, we hit the oh my God moment. This is here to stay. Like a marathon, strategy, focus, endurance, and pace are required to recover from the sprint burnout. Bear in mind that during the sprint, people were working all kinds of crazy hours and stuff like that, and we're actually facing burnout. Next slide. So what are the pieces to the jigsaw puzzle of business resilience? I like the term puzzle because I do jigsaw puzzles every now and again. I don't know if you do, but there's nothing more disappointing than completing a 2,000-piece puzzle to find there's one piece missing. The same applies to these 4 pieces. A broken process, for example, can make the business vulnerable. The order's been chosen purposefully, as many believe digital transformation is the key. But it's not. It's the facilitator to be applied as and when required. Business resilience is a business, not an imperative initiative. Next slide. This is the result of a study that was done, quite an extensive study. It was done in the US, and it was really to try and find out what people were feeling, what was their state of mind. So I use something called word cloud. It actually gathers all the information together. It picks up keywords, words that are used most often. Those are the words that are highly in bold or in size. Those are the ones that are most prevalent. And just to support that, one of the stats, and there are many that come out of that, and I don't necessarily believe in statistics, not from an accuracy point of view, but just as a general trend, it's pretty real. So 68% of tech workers felt more burnt out working from home than the office. So people don't know when to go home. One of the things that faces them. So they work, and because they're working at home, a lot of them feel guilty because they're working at home. They have the stresses at home of the family. People coming to terms with this. I know what my wife said to me when she thought I was going to retire. She said, I hope you're not going to retire at home. Anyway, we've got over that now. So hopefully this helps people prioritize what's really important. So leadership today, so successful leaders today, they will demonstrate empathy. One of my favorite topics is servant leadership. I've apologized to everybody, and I've done that repeatedly when I was leading teams, which I've done for quite a long time, that they were learning at my expense, that I was learning at their expense. I apologize to all those that have suffered under my leadership and learning experience. I believe very strongly in radical candor. Okay, that is really telling people the way it is, but it has to be on the basis of care, that you care for people. That's why you tell them. I've used the word egoless. I haven't seen it anywhere else, but like Narcissus, Lee Iacocca, Donald Trump and others, madly in love with themselves, well, actually the image of themselves, have little time for others, what they feel, what they think, what's important to them, what their aspirations are. I wonder how many leaders know that Joe has 3 children, one of which has cerebral palsy, and takes a lot of time away from the office for him to look after the child, etc. Not many people, they don't think it's their job to know how their people feel. The bottom line is trust is the foundation for any business between all stakeholders. And I mean all stakeholders. So this is not just you and your people, not your people, your peer-to-peer group. This is your customers, your suppliers, your regulatory authorities, the taxpayer. There needs to be trust between all parties. And remember, you're a mirror, which is what you project. So don't pretend. Trusted people work harder for you and themselves to prove the trust is warranted. There's no better way of showing that you trust somebody by empowering them and helping them grow. Also today, it's very personal. The conversation needs to change. So there's more of a, how are you feeling today? How can I help you? Becomes part of the discussion. People that worked with me at IBM will remember the organization chart. So this is a typical organization chart, and the name John Wayne has been used on purpose because he will ride roughshod over his reportees. So what's missing from this picture? Next slide. Is this not a better picture? So this to me is a good illustration of servant leadership. That in fact the leaders, the managers, the sub-managers are all support entities for the frontline people. So those I've used acronyms CSR1, Customer Service Rep 1, PSR is the Partner Support Rep, SSR is a Supplier Support Rep, just for illustration purposes. And at the top of it all are your customers, suppliers, and partners. So it's not the normal chart, is it? But it's a chart that I used at IBM, where I turned the organization chart for the team that I was leading to reflect the fact that I'm there to support them. It took a long time to understand that. What it does is reflect the importance of your teams dealing with your stakeholders, who are then supported by the team leaders. Many people, businesses treat customers, partners, and suppliers differently. Why? Each can blot your market image equally, so put your good people there, empowered to take the majority of decisions. It doesn't take long for a stakeholder to know they're dealing with an underling, somebody with no authority whatsoever. We worked with a young lady who ran a contact center in the UK. It was an incredibly successful contact center, and so much so that she was actually recruited to come to South Africa to lead one of the big banks, or build one of the big banks' contact centers based on her success in the UK. So what she had in those frontline people, those CSRs or telephone support reps and stuff like that, she had people with degrees, people that were well qualified to actually answer the customer's issues. How often do you know that you're going to speak to somebody who can't say boo to a goose, has no authority whatsoever, and is just a messenger? It's a waste of your time, a waste of their time, and it doesn't do wonders for their image. As far as the organization is concerned, the organization should be flat. Why flat? Clarity of communication, speed of action. We work with one particular organization that, in order to get any piece of work done, requires 9 signatures, which really doesn't show that the person who's actually engaged with the contract is trusted. And by the time you get to the second or third person above the person really involved, they haven't got a clue what they're signing. So it's just a waste of time, waste of space. It makes the person who's responsible for the delivery against the contract just feel belittled. I believe that no titles is an option, to think about that, because titles create internal competition. Everybody wants to climb up the ladder to get to that next title, and there's only one of them, so somebody has to die or leave. We work with our organization at Symbiotics with no titles. The competition is outside, not inside. People get ahead based on their performance, on their development, and their delivery. Put your best people empowered at the customer and supplier. That was a bit of a drag up from the last presentation. Empowered frontline engenders trust. Rotating people reduces one's dependence on a particular person in a particular role. It's also good for people because they get a chance to learn new things. It's exciting, and it avoids something called plateauing. I think the organization should have an inclusive culture. So when Symbiotics developed our core values, we involved every person in the company. It took 18 months to do it, but it gave people a long time to think about something that was important as it is. So inclusivity is really, really important. If you want commitment, you get commitment through involvement. And then in the organization, another little anecdote, a very well-known person in the financial services community in South Africa attended we called it a banking university. So once a year, we'd run a banking university, which would do nothing more than talk about banks, their challenges, how we were going to market best to them. So everybody involved from IBM attended that university. And we got customers to come and talk to us. And they enjoyed coming to talk to us to talk about their businesses. Don't people love talking about themselves? So this gentleman at the end of the presentation that he gave on that day, I can't think what it was in particular, but he came to us and said, "You clever marketing guys," he says, "tell me, I have a problem." He said, "I have 4 channels to market reporting to me. And the channels now competing with each other. They're actually cannibalizing individual markets. So people trying to attract the customers from the branch to a telephony channel or to the website or whatever. So they weren't growing the business. They were just feeding off each other. So I asked him and I said, "How are you measuring these people?" He said, "Well, 90% on their individual performance and 10% on the team performance." And I said, "And so you expect different behavior to that which they're performing?" So whether he changed or not, I don't know, but it certainly explained why he was getting the behavior that he was. Silos competing with each other. Got to stop that. Okay, next slide. So leadership today. So where to go? Some ideas, not just to go and say, okay, this is what's happening and this is what we need and whatever. So here's a little bit of a hints and tips as to kind of things that you can start to do. So as I said earlier, look at yourself in the mirror. How are you feeling? Really? You need to seek help from peers. I mean, you need to be resilient as well. People will see how you're feeling. They'll hear how you're feeling. So don't pretend. Set up one-on-ones to talk to your people about how they feel. Not the business discussion, but the personal discussion. How many people are actually equipped to do that today? So one of the things that happened at Harvard Business School, I think in the 90s, is the focus was on profit at any cost. And profit at any cost has actually destroyed trust in companies. So we at Symbiotics had a people first philosophy. So our profit was a result of what we did. It wasn't the purpose for our business. Sounds crazy. We had Clem Sunter come and join us on a planning session. I don't know if any of you know who Clem Sunter is. I hope so. He writes very, very well. So he came to use his Socratic method of strategy with us as a company, which was quite something. And when we told him about our ethos in business, that really we were focused on growth of people, which would result in the profit we were looking for, but not the profit itself. And he shook the tree a lot of times in that morning he spent, or that day he spent with us. And at the end of the day, he actually said, wow, He said, if I'd known about you earlier, I would have written it up in my book. So we've held true to those values. Time to reset your goals. Set the sail. What's your business destination in the next 3 years? What is the purpose of being in business? So that's a leadership responsibility, defining the what. Then based on inclusivity, you let your people build the how. And that way they're committed. From that, you'll actually develop the KPIs for the business and be able to track them. And those will be effectively KPIs that your people have created themselves. Review your core values. I can't stress this anymore. They are so important, I believe. Not everybody believes core values. They think you should have them, put them on your website, maybe put a picture up on the wall. But it's a case of living them. And the second point, I think that when people said to us, why do you stay in the company? A lot of the newbies who came in and said, when you stressed core values when we joined, it was interesting. After the first year, we take every newbie and said, okay, so what was your experience? And the feedback that we got was that you live your core values. Communicate like mad. Communicate to all stakeholders. Call your customers. Confirm your commitment. Ask after their welfare. Find out how they're coping and how they want to work with you. Because in terms of their transformation, where are they? So you're working with a lot of moving parts, both within your own organization and also in your client organization. But clients will appreciate you reaching out, asking them how they're doing, asking them how their transformation's going, asking them how they want to work with you. And then lastly, introduce a what-if capability in your organization. This can be done internally, it can be done externally, but one needs to keep a finger on the pulse as much as one can. What is likely to happen in the future? What if this happens? What if that happens? And test that against your strategy. You need to be adaptable. You need to be the fox, not the hedgehog. If you want to read the books by Clem Santa and Charlene Ilbury, then those are their depictions of whether somebody is wrapping themselves up into a ball, hoping for the storm to pass, or actually getting out there, understanding their environment and being adaptable to whatever changes are taking place. It's a good time to pivot, a good time to look at yourselves again and say, where am I on this growth curve? You probably have seen this. It's described as the S curves, or the bottom line is it's actually a sigmoid curve. Okay, so where are you on that graph? Is your business growing? So are you on the uplift, going up on the red line? Have you reached a point A, which says that I can't continue, my business is no longer sustainable, going along these lines? So I need to relook and see whether I need to move from being a product to being a service business. We've pivoted several times at Symbiotics, and not because we had to. We'd have a look every now and again, and not as often as I would like, but whatever, we didn't. So originally we had all the equipment in our offices, and we had desktop jockeys actually helping keep the systems alive. We had servers there, and the services needed to be refreshed and replaced and software loaded and et cetera, and after about 8 years of doing that ourselves, we decided to stop and let somebody else do that for us, and actually went and took these infrastructure services, and they were conducted for us by a company that we'd never met in the US. Anyway, long story, eventually we became an AWS business partner and everything's on an AWS. So now it's not a case of just offering software development services, it's also offering hosting services. So that was one area where we've significantly changed the way we're doing business. So I said that there were more than one component. There were four. So what about process and technology? You may well ask, but this is right now we're in the endurance phase. The one to ensure we don't snap back, the horse before the cart, so to speak, on a foundation of trust, committed, engaged, healthy and happy people, you can transform your business. But let's get the cart before the horse before the cart, rather. Also understand that people need to overcome their resistance to change. Change is not everyone's cup of tea. There must be a reason for change. It's disruptive. On Wednesday, I was told a client of ours was restructuring, which is a regular occurrence based on new leaders being appointed at least once a year. When I asked what the purpose was, I was told I have no idea. Change needs buy-in. It's a process and needs a purpose and involvement. Well, that's the end. I hope I haven't overrun too badly. These are the references. If you want to go and read a lot of what I've read, then that's where I've got a lot of the information from, but most of it from practical experience. So thanks for your attention. And if there are any questions I can answer, I'll be happy to do so.